Hey, what's going on my 43,000 amazing subscribers? I hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic. If you are new to my channel, my name is Jason and I do a whole bunch of tips, tricks, tutorials on photography gear, cameras and all that kind of stuff. But today we're going to be talking about the A7IV, the FX6 and the A7III, and just a video I wanted to do for myself just to see the differences, to compare 4K footage, to compare 1080 footage, and really just talk about the workflow and the differences between a video camera and a hybrid photography video camera as well. But let's start with the image quality. I did compare the A7III, the A7IV, and the FX6 when it comes to 4K. And who do you think is actually going to be better? Let's put up the images right now. This is the footage. So all of these were recorded with the Sony G Master 35mm f1.4, shot at f2.5, ISO 800, shutter 1/50th, and all in S-Log3. So what do you think? Which one is which? So the FX6 obviously is on the left here. You've got in the middle is the A7IV and A7III on the right hand side. Now, if we do punch into 300% on this just to see the image sharpness, you can see the A7IV in the middle is much sharper. Now, there is a bit of a color difference. We're gonna be talking about that in a second, but the A7IV is sharper. You got the A7III is not as sharp, but it is still sharp. And the FX6 isn't as sharp when it comes to 4K footage. Now, we have to talk about the resolution of the sensors. Now, the FX6 is a 12 megapixel full frame sensor, 33 megapixel full frame sensor on the A7IV, 24 megapixel full frame sensor on the A7III. But because this only shoots in 16:9 and it doesn't shoot open gate, neither do these two. And so the resolution is lower than 33 megapixels and lower than 24 megapixels. This one ends up being about 10.2 megapixels when it comes to that full frame image. So you're not actually getting as sharp image as you would with the downsampled 7K or downsampled 6K. So when it actually comes down to the sharpness of the image, the A7IV wins hands down. It's great, it's a nice clean image, and it's a fabulous 4K footage. Now when it comes to dynamic range, Cine did their dynamic range test in the studios, and the A7IV actually had better dynamic range than the FX6, which is phenomenal, it's great. But you can see a color difference between the three cameras. And also the noise suppression and ergonomics and workflow, that is a lot different when it comes to the cinema camera and the A7IV and A7III, but we'll talk about that later. Now, these two cameras, the FX6 and the A7IV, are 10-bit color. So when it comes to extreme color grading, you're going to have more colors to work with because the A7III only has 8-bit. That is the big reason why I actually wanted to get the A7IV over the A7III, is because the 10-bit color. It gives you more information when it comes to color grading and just gives you much more natural skin tones because you have more colors to adjust those skin tones, and it works better in S-Log3. Now, when it comes to the color difference, there is a bit of a green shift in the A7IV, whereas there is a magenta shift when it comes to the FX6, and there's that old magenta shift in the A7III as well. So these colors are actually quite similar. This one is a little bit different. Now, I did actually create my own LUT when it comes to the A7IV, and you guys are seeing it right now. It gives you a little bit more of a pinkyish red tones in the skin tones. So if you do want to check out my LUT, the link will be in the description below. Helps my channel out amazingly, but hopefully it'll give you some value, and it gives you a bit of a starting point just to try and change that green shift. Now, it really depends on what you actually want to get out of it and what your desired look is, because if you actually throw on the standard Sony LUT, you still get a little bit of a green shift, but not as much. It's a bit flat and it really depends. But even with the standard Rec 709 LUT, you do need to adjust it. You know, your contrasting, your shadows, highlights, just move the sliders here and there and you're pretty much done. But in terms of that overall sharpness, A7IV hands down wins in 4K. Now, when it comes to 1080p, I still know a lot of people shoot in 1080p, and this is actually a pretty decent test. The A7III comes in last, the A7IV is actually second, and the FX6 is actually really clean in 1080. Like, the image quality is phenomenal in 1080. The noise floor is actually really low. The image just looks nice and sharp and clean, whereas these two have a little bit of a noise floor in the shadows. They're not as clean. The resolution isn't as good as the FX6. You can definitely tell the FX6 handles the 1080p footage much better. Now, obviously the FX6 is a cinema camera slash broadcast camera, so a lot of people would actually be using 1080p in this. So that is probably why they've optimized the 1080p footage to look quite good, because it is a viable option for a lot of working professionals out there to shoot 1080 still, and this camera will definitely do a great job. Now, when it comes to slow motion, the FX6 already wins hands down because it has 4K 120. There's a big difference between 1080p 120 in these two cameras. The A7 IV does a better job. Once again, the A7 III is a little bit behind, and you still have that 10-bit color when it comes to slow motion in these two cameras. You only have 8-bit in this one as well. But when it comes to 4K, the A7 IV actually does 4K 60 now, which is great, but it does have that Super 35 crop. So you will actually have to be aware of that if you are shooting some professional work and you're using some primes. I did get stuck in one of my commercials, and I couldn't go far back enough because I wasn't prepared for that crop and the small room size that I was actually working with. So I should have brought a different lens. But now I bring some of my APS-C lenses if I am shooting in slow motion, and I actually use my APS-C lenses on the A7 IV. And man, the Sigma 16mm f1.4 ends up being a 24mm f1.4 with now I've got the 24mm f1.4 here, but obviously if I am shooting in slow motion, the Sigma lenses are going to be great, or even any APS-C lenses are going to be great on the A7 IV. But overall, when it comes down to workflow, that's when these cameras are obviously different. Specifically, the FX6 and these two cameras right here. These are hybrid mirrorless cameras. This shoots video only, but you can see the amount of customizable buttons. It has a bigger body. It has much more customization for professional workflow, especially the internal ND filters. It's got XLR inputs on the handles, SDI output, timecode, and all those kind of professional features that you would actually need on a set. And these things are lacking those. So it really does come down to the workflow. So even if the image quality is slightly better on the A7 III and A7 IV compared to the FX6, the workflow is going to be much better for professional work. But because the FX6 is a one-to-one readout, pretty much a one-to-one readout, it has a faster rolling shutter performance. So the sensor on here is definitely better, less rolling shutter. So if you are doing filming a lot of moving subjects, the FX6 is going to win hands down. The A7 IV and the A7 III has a lot more processing to do inside the camera, so the sensor does read out a lot slower, which gives you a little bit of rolling shutter. So if that is important to you, then you will have to look elsewhere. I would suggest the A7S III or the FX3 when it comes to video. But nonetheless, in the last two commercials that I actually shot, there wasn't any really fast moving subjects. The A7 IV actually did a phenomenal job. If anything, the A7 IV looked better than what the FX6 had looked, because I was shooting in all controlled lighting environments. And obviously I had everything under control, and I was able to make the A7 IV look good, because if you are doing professional work, you should be investing in lighting gear, because that is what actually makes your footage look incredible and professional compared to just run and gun on a gimbal. So when it comes to some of the professional features, the FX6 obviously has pretty much all the professional features that you need, but the A7 IV still has some features that the FX6 doesn't. That has a variable shutter, so you can actually go 1/50.1 of a second, which is great, or 0.2, 0.3, 50.4. So if you do have some flickering when it comes to filming phones specifically, I've noticed this, you can actually dial it in to the point so you have zero flickering on the phone. Obviously, if you do have different lights and stuff, really low quality lights, they tend to flicker. You can actually put the variable shutter on and make those adjustments in camera, which is a fabulous feature as well. Now, the focus mapping, I really thought the FX6 was actually gonna get it in the latest firmware, yet it didn't. Focus mapping is on the A7 IV, which is incredible when it comes to manual focusing, and you can really see what is actually in focus, and trust me, it helps incredibly. But overall, I'm really happy with the sensor on the A7 IV, but once again, it comes down to lighting and comes down to learning how you're using the A7 IV to its fullest capabilities. But same thing, you can get incredible looking footage on the A7 III, and I absolutely suggest try and learn as much as you can with lighting, composition, framing with the A7 III before you tend to upgrade, because I know a lot of people are like, well, to take my, videography business to the next level, I'm needing a better camera. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you need just better usage, more experience. Try and get better lighting in there, because lighting is still one of the most important things when it comes to making your footage looking professional. But anyway, guys, I hope this video helped in some way or another. It was just really just to satisfy my curiosity to see what the image looked like between these three cameras. But yeah, I hope you found this video useful or entertaining. If you did, give it a thumbs up. That would be absolutely amazing. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you already haven't, and click on my link in the description below for the LUT if you do want to check out the Sony A7 IV LUT. But yeah, other than that, guys, I'll see you in the next one. All right, let's get it.